Hello everybody, welcome to Little Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. Trying to hit 50k subscribers over here, so that subscription would be much appreciated. I wanted to do another one of these videos debating the franchise GOAT for different teams, and forgive me, but I am jumping on the ship to one of the biggest franchises in NBA history. The Celtics have the most championships in NBA history, and they've been a relevant franchise in the NBA forever. Like, basically, I believe their first championship was in 1958, and they would, of course, go on to win 11 in that era, 7 of them happening consecutively. They won every single championship besides for one of them in the 1960s. They also had some championships in the 70s that are kind of never talked about, but like it was John Havlicek, JoJo White, Dave Cowens, I want to say was the center. I think that's right. 1974 and 1976. John Havlicek, by the way, he's not going to be in this conversation for greatest player in franchise history, but he's in my opinion, one of the most underrated players ever, period, because like the moment that the guy was given like starting minutes and was given like a lead role, he was literally putting up fucking like LeBron numbers in his prime. I'll just real quick, just to give some shout out to John Havlicek, becomes a starter right after Bill Russell retires, and for 5 straight seasons, including the year that they won a championship in 74, he put up 25 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, and 7 assists per game, doing that as a shooting guard slash small forward, which back then not nearly as many point forwards, but he was exactly that. Anyways, a long tangent on John Havlicek. They won 2 championships in the 70s. They won 3 in the 80s with Larry Bird's Celtics. He is obviously at the forefront of this conversation, as well as Bill Russell. And then they actually have not been as good in recent years, as after winning their last one in, I want to say, 84 or 85? 86. Yeah. 84 was like the best of the Celtics, but 86 was also a phenomenal year for them. But they won 3 championships in the 80s, one at the very top of the decade in 1981. Then it was a very long drought, didn't really do shit in the 90s. Part of that was unfortunately Len Bias dying, as well as I feel bad for blanking on his name right now, but it's kind of a plain name, like a very like, yep, that's a first name and a last name. Reggie Lewis. Yeah, Reggie Lewis, also someone who was on the up and up in the 90s and could have potentially helped bolster them, especially if he played alongside Len Bias. But that era, because of literally 2 big deaths, which does not happen much in the NBA world, where like literally a player dying is the reason that you don't find success. But that's exactly what happened to the Celtics in the 90s. They bring together the Big 3 era with Paul Pierce, KG, and Ray Allen in 2008. A little bit disappointing. They probably could have won more, but also injuries and age was a factor. I know people like to shit on that team a lot, but like it's not that big of a deal. They maybe talk a little bit too much, but whatever, I can't blame them for that. And then of course they won very recently in 2024. Only 2 titles though since 1986. So they haven't been as relevant and as storied. We can say confidently their best eras were the 80s and the 60s. And really, if we're talking about who the best or greatest player in Celtics history is, you gotta just say that it's Bill Russell or Larry Bird. Like, I put Paul Pierce in the thumbnail out of respect, but I also don't really believe he's even a better player than Jason Tatum is. So like in terms of just the player of it all, I wouldn't even put him that high. Could even argue in terms of like absolute peak, Kevin McHale was like, I don't think people realize how goddamn good Kevin McHale was at his absolute peak. In 1987, he averaged 26 points and 10 rebounds, as well as 2.2 blocks. 5th in Defensive Player of the Year, 4th in MVP voting, and made All-NBA First Team and the Defensive First Team. Shorter peak though, so you know, maybe not. Either way, I do think when it gets to the conversation beyond those two, it's not it's interesting, but like Tatum, Pierce, you could throw KG in there if you want to as well, but he doesn't really have the longevity with the franchise, and then Kevin McHale as well. And I guess if I'm going to keep up the slander for Paul Pierce, I believe that Kevin Garnett was the best player on that team, and I don't even feel like it was particularly close, but the counting stats would lean towards Paul Pierce because he was the leading scorer on that team. But the way that Kevin Garnett just completely transformed that defense and then was also a very, very good offensive player, to me, he was the best player on that 08 team, but that's neither here nor there. The conversation is between Bill Russell and Larry Bird. And I think what the answer comes down to is, as it always does, is like what you value more. Obviously, if we're just doing a championship counting conversation, then Bill Russell wins. He wins that conversation against literally everybody. But if you want to argue that, you know, being the better actual basketball talent matters more, or possibly even just like being more iconic, because I do think just because it's literally a more popular era of the NBA, because games were televised far more frequently, because there's just way, way, way more footage of the actual important events, like you could argue that Larry Bird ends up being the greatest, or at least the most popular Celtic of all time. I guess it depends again on how much you end up valuing him. I also do have to mention this because I'm just looking at it over here on Basketball Reference. Kevin McHale had a nickname that was Herman Munster. What the fuck is that? What does that mean? Who the hell is Herman Munster? A fictional character in the CBS sitcom The Munsters. He looks like a monster? He looks like Frankenstein. Herman is one of Frankenstein's monsters. That's kind of mean. That's kind of a mean name. Kevin McHale, wildly broad shoulders. Maybe the broadest shoulders in human history, I want to say, if you look at that man in a jersey. It's also partially just because the jerseys back then, the top of it was just so thin. But anyways, I'm losing myself on these tangents here. I think Larry Bird was a better player than Bill Russell, but not by like some significant margin because of the defensive impact of Bill Russell. There's no doubt that Larry Bird is a significantly better offensive player, but me personally, I do value offense more so than defense, but it's also a little contextualized to the era because like the 80s were a more offense heavy era than the 60s were, and in the 60s specifically because jump shots were taken far, far less, because getting the ball close enough to the basket as possible was like literally the only thing that offenses were thinking about 9 times out of 10 back then. Like having an all-time great rim protector, in fact, probably the all-time great rim protector by all accounts. I've seen a decent amount of highlights, but again, as I say, there's only so much to really be gleaned. A lot of it is conjecture, a lot of it is word of mouth, but everything seems to indicate that Bill Russell was putting up like 5 blocks plus per game. There are people who exaggerate that number, I have to imagine. Like there are people who have claimed that Bill Russell averaged 10 blocks per game. Surely that's not the case. I haven't seen much evidence of that anyways, but maybe that is the case. Either way, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and specifically if you're scaling it to era, there has never been a defensive player as by far and away the best defensive player in the league and the most dominant than Bill Russell was in the 60s. There has never been a gap between the number 1 defender and the number 2 defender in the era more significant than that of Bill Russell. But Larry Bird was also just a fucking savant, and he also had the aura factor, which is very, very important, as we know. Just like the coolest dude there ever was. Like trash talk, badass moments, telling you what he's gonna do before you do it. And while I am one to say that Larry Bird is an overrated ass 3-point shooter because you cannot place him as an all-time great 3-point shooter when there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players who have made more 3-pointers in their career. Like, you can't be that guy when you didn't do it. I don't care if hypothetically he could have in a different context. What ifs do not determine the actual discourse. It's a fun thing, but it is not a point to make in an actual conversation. But Larry Bird, the overall basketball talent, I think is severely underrated by a lot of people because he kind of just gets chalked up to the jump shot now. Larry Bird is the guy who shoots really well. He's super clutch. But when you look into it, first of all, the guy started his career playing power forward. I feel like that is not mentioned a whole lot. He also was NBA champion by his second year in the NBA on a playoff run in which he averaged 22 points, 6 assists, 3.3 stocks, and 14 rebounds per game. He also has a championship run where he averaged 28, 11, and 6 and 3 stocks, 26, 8 and 26, 9, 8 assists. Damn, 8 assists per game. That's crazy. Nearly 3 stocks as well. I also think he's underrated as a defensive player. He actually even got fucking third in DPOY voting in 1983. It's worth mentioning very, very early into the inception of the DPOY award. And obviously, Bill Russell would have substantially more. Would actually have won like probably fucking 8 Defensive Player of the Year awards. But like his peak numbers, if I just go from his rookie year on to basically right before he fucked up his back in 1988. So for his peak numbers for 8 or 9 seasons, 25 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game, 2.4 stocks, and that is on 50, 38, 88 shooting splits. 2.2 offensive rebounds per game, career double-double average, like 6 assists per game. I mentioned this with John Havlicek. Like a point forward was not that common at this time. Like it was truly transformative the way that he could pass. And like he's not as good of a passer as Magic Johnson, but like he would have games where he could give him a run for his money. Like 8 assists per game for an entire title run is that's pretty significant. Again, especially out of a dude playing the forward position in the 80s. So I don't know. Like me personally, I do have Bill Russell over Larry Bird all time, but both of them are like anywhere between 8 to 12 for me. It's actually been a while since I did an all-time ranking. Maybe I'll do that again. It's kind of a shit show whenever you do that. My camera just turned off. But whatever, we got a minute. I'm just wrapping this video up anyways. Yeah, I can't really give you a definitive answer. So let me know in the comments below, Larry Bird or Bill Russell, who is actually the GOAT for that franchise. I don't have a definitive answer. I'm an outsider. So let me know, especially if you're a Celtics fan, what you think. But that is it. Goodbye.